Okay, everybody, welcome. Thanks so much for joining the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster meeting. I'm Dave Jones, one of the co-chairs of Disaster Lifecycle Cluster, and Maggie Glasgow is also on. So anytime you have questions for us, please just put them in the chat. We want to make this a very conversational session. And I'm going to share my slides here so we can kind of move on with this part of the meeting because we have a lot to talk about. We have a great speaker slash participant in the session today, and we'll get to him in just a minute. So let me put this into slideshow mode and share my screen. Okay, so here we go. For those of you that are new to ESIP, welcome. For those of you that are new to the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster, welcome. We've been around for a while and have gone through a bunch of different iterations of identifying data and trusted data for wildfires over the last several years, and that led to the formation of the Wildfire Cluster. Today, we're going to be talking about a new initiative that we're putting together for ESIP and the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster, and it's called the Trusted Data Now Initiative. And what that basically means is we're going to finally put into motion an effort to identify trusted data sources that can be accessed in times of disaster, pre-disaster, and post-disaster to help with recovery and also building of resilience. We've talked about this. We've done it in some cases with wildfire data. But what we really want to do here, for those of you that are joined in this session, is we're going to have an effort where we pull up a spreadsheet and we want you to enter in links and descriptions of data sets that you know about. And so, whoops, I don't know. Am I still here? Looks like something may have. I'll just keep talking.
Is
I
he
can
still?
still hear you, but just can't see you.
Okay, no problem. So what we're going to do is, in the next slide here, just give everybody a quick little, I know you've probably gone through this with every session. Just, keep yourself muted if you're not talking. When you're asking a question, we would love for you to be a part of the conversation. So if you feel comfortable, turn your camera on so we can see you and we can see what's happening, and we can start to build a relationship with you as you ask your questions. If not, you can just put them in the chat, which is no problem. Please sign in to the Google Notes doc, which is in Kiko Chat. We've done that for a lot of sessions. Maggie, you can put that link in there if people don't have it. You can sign in, put that relevant information in there so we can know who's here and where you're from and all that stuff. Also, please ask questions through the chat and feel free to engage in conversations. I think that QR code, Maggie, does that take them to the notes doc?
Let me check.
Yeah. I think it might take them to the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster notes instead of the one that we're here. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm just going to go forward. We do have some poll questions that we want to ask you, and you can join us at the Slido QR code here. So if you kind of load that up with your phone, then when we go through different questions, you can just answer them through your phone or online as well. Okay. So what are we going to do today in this session? We're going to just introduce it a little bit. We'd love to know who's here, why we're here. We have a guest speaker, Phil Balin from California National Guard and also from FEMA Region 9. Phil's going to tell us about some of his experiences with identifying data in disaster situations and it can be frustrating at times, and we're going to try to close that gap. That's what we're doing here. We're going to talk a lot about data, and we hope that you join the monthly conversations that we have. We have monthly meetings within the disaster lifecycle cluster. It's the first Thursday of every month, and we hope that you can join us. It doesn't have to be every month, but we do keep meeting monthly and try to get down the road further on disaster data issues. And then we have sort of a horizon of the July meeting, what we want to do there, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So the first poll question, how are you feeling about ESIP? This is day 3, and just wanted to take a poll for how you're feeling. And I'm going to switch my tab here and share my screen. Oh, can you still see the poll results? Can you see that?
Yep, they're up there. Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Here we go. So it's great. Great people. I agree. Empowered, awesome. Connected, fantastic. That's great. So keep coming in with some of your responses, and we'll just give it about 30 more seconds just so you can put in your how you're feeling. Sometimes it's overwhelmed with all the great information, since we talk a lot about data, but this is all it's all good. Love the collaboration. Excellent. That's what ESIP's all about, is how we can collaborate and do it more. Awesome. Excited. Great people. Great information. Fantastic. Well, that is great. Okay. The next question, I'll just go through the slide here like this, is who is here? Uh, please see the Slido poll if you want to fill that out. Do I need to do anything, Maggie, to go to the next? Oh no, you're doing it. Okay. So, are you a data provider? Are you a data manager? Do you do research? Are you a developer? You work in communication or education or other? And if you click other, maybe you can put it in the chat what else you do. And here we go with answers. It's awesome. Data managers are winning the race here right now. 17 folks have input. We have 33 participating in here. So come on, more of you can answer. I see you're doing that as well. Second is research. Third, data provider. Developer. I'm really glad that there are developers here, because we would love your input as we talk about trusted data, web services, and things like that. How we might be able to leverage some of your talents or things that that are going on with regard to trusted data access. We have 21 respondents. Others in there. And in the chat, we have coming up here, a cross between developer and data provider. That's great, Melissa. That's super. When you're a data provider and a developer, then next is figuring out what user requirements are and how to get the data to the users in ways that they want it. So that's what we'll be talking about as well. Okay, 22 respondents. I'll give it another just 10 seconds here so you can get in any responses that you might want to get in. Looks like data manager is number 1, other number 2, and if you clicked other, just put into the chat what you're working on. and what makes it other. We'd be real glad to know. Research, developer, data provider. Okay, let's go IT project manager, data geek. Oh, we love data geeks. Awesome. That's great, Bob. Thank you. Okay, so the next slide here, whoops, went the wrong way. Why are we here? So we're launching this initiative, this Trusted Data Now initiative, which basically puts a sense of immediacy on data. As web services expand, we see more open data services in web service formats from organizations like NOAA. Um, NASA has some that they've put together as well, offering KMLs and things like that of live updating services. Network KMLs are very helpful. But when disasters strike, all heck breaks loose. People are looking for data. They get onto Google and look for data. And that's when things can break down, where you might access data sets and you're not quite sure if they're trusted. And I've been in emergency operations centers where they were about to make decisions on data that was put together by high school teams. And just because they wanted something or it looked good. So they have a real, they're equating data that looks good to data that is trustworthy. And that's a problem. So this is just an example of our disaster lifecycle cluster activities, where in a geospatial environment, we're accessing here National Weather Service watches, warnings, advisories that they put out, and these are updated every minute or two. So if new ones come on, they pop on to the map in real time. And then in this application, which is GeoCollaborate, we can circle this area and do a real-time population extraction using a data service from NASA's CDAC at Columbia University in New York City. So it really goes into their database, pulls that out, and shows population differences, how it's grown since 2000, that is, yeah, to 2005, 10, 15, and 2020. So this kind of capability shows that web services are really a very good way to go when you want data. You don't want to download and save and have to process data, but you want access to it so it can give you that answer from a trusted source, and also from a data curator whose job it is to make sure that data is being offered and available. So it really kind of cuts out a middle person, if you will, when you can get data right from the source, the trusted source, if they're offering it in ways that can be accessed quickly. And I'm not talking about accessing data to process and visualize. I'm talking about accessing data that can be put to use by non-technical decision makers. So they just want to see what's going on. They don't want to dive into other types of processing. Here's an example of web services from NOAA and the National Weather Service. You can see their reference maps, watches, warnings, advisories. This is when you click that, this opens up. And the Weather Service has moved to the cloud now. So they have cloud GIS services, and those services seem to be working very well. They're in the cloud. Tropical weather products and services, and all of these others here. Here's one over here for air quality that I just clicked on the air quality tab, and it was so long because they have these data types that can be accessed. And once they're web services, they can update in real time whenever that data service is updated on the NOAA side. And that is very responsive and very well accepted in the industry. And there are private sector companies now that are looking to make their data available. How can they do that? Well, web services is a great way to do that. And we'll get into talking about how do we know when that data is going to be updated and when it's going to be available, which is very important. And so there's also an effort within FEMA. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. This is called FEMA Dex. It's designed or they're developing it now, designed to be an agile delivery service for data. FEMA is very interested in uh, creating this service, this cloud-based data and analytics platform, which is designed to meet these core missions: discover, access, and gather data from internal and external sources. I'm not sure we're going to dive in further, and we're going to be inviting the program manager for this project to come and speak to our monthly meeting over the next couple of months, which should be pretty great. Maintain data integrity, security, and confidentiality. Integrate cross-cutting and disparate data sets. So they're looking at integrating data sets and maybe offering that result as a service. I don't know. This is what we're going to have to find out a little bit more about. And analyze data to identify meaningful insights. So all of these, with the impression that I have so far, is that this system will be web services based and in the cloud. And FEMA is going to be diving into all sorts of data that they can pull together and offer. I don't know if that means they're going to do this with other agency data, where other agencies are standing up their own geospatial data infrastructure, or FEMA wants to take a lead in this area. I don't know. And so we'll be finding out more about this as time goes on. And so our Trusted Data Now initiative, this is what our goal is: to identify trusted data that is available or soon to be available to assist decision makers. This could be rapid response missions, model output, trusted AI. I don't know if I'd love anybody's input here in this session. If the two words trusted AI can be used currently, or historical comparative data as a web service is a way to get it out there quickly and integrate it into other GIS-based systems. And this is kind of the quote that Phil, gave us in a previous meeting months ago, where he said, "We have no way of seeing what data is available or being collected in disaster areas. We have to open doors to open science and not force people to be in the know on where to get data." And that is really so true. I've heard that from many, many people where they would love to get access to it, but they just can't. They don't have the expertise. We talk so much in ESIP about data discoverability and AI and machine learning and all this stuff. And the poor people that are out there with no knowledge of this, who want to use our data, are saying help. And that's what we're going to be trying to do, is to help them and deliver data to them in real time and give them an idea for how this data can be used. So we have a way to do that through our ESIP ecosystem of innovation that we put together in the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster. We'll talk about that more in a future meeting. And also our operational readiness levels, ORLs, which are operational readiness levels for data. So non-technical folks can look at this and see, oh, that's an ORL 1. I can trust it and move on with it and start to make decisions. We developed that in conjunction with the All Hazards Consortium, which is a nonprofit organization with 45,000 stakeholders in many different areas: food, fuel, transportation, logistics, medical supply, communication, utilities, power, and emergency managers across many states. And they're all saying, look, we don't have time to look for all this data. Some emergency operations have GIS professionals, others don't. They want help in identifying data and how they can use it. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker. It's Phil Balin. Phil is with the California National Guard and FEMA Region 9. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Phil can start sharing his. And Phil, it's all yours. And we'll join back in once you're finished with a great conversation here.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I'm in the process of trying to share my screen, but it could use some feedback if you're seeing it or not. Or
We're seeing your screen, but we're seeing the tab. If you go over to your
okay,
presentation,
let me go
yeah,
here to the
there you go.
presentation
Yep.
and let me make sure it's in the right format. Uh,
And yep,
let me get it into screen sharing mode, and it
presentation
should
there.
be almost there.
Looks like, oh, you just got to switch the display settings. Yep.
How's
There you
that?
go. Perfect. It's all yours.
Great. So nice to meet all of you, and I look forward to our discussion. And so I've worked in California the last 20, 25 years. And before that, I got started out in GIS with the USGS. We were studying in the geology division debris flows, and that allowed me to use early forms of GIS to look at susceptibility to debris flows. Then later in years worked for local government. I worked overseas a bit again on landslides, and I came back and spent a good amount of years working in local and later state agency using GIS, and largely for this conversation and disaster response and planning. And I also got introduced to, in California, we have a California Earthquake Clearinghouse, and I was active in that in the last decade. So in the teens, we created a data lead, which I was, and one of the areas that we worked on most was data sharing and trying to get people familiar with what data was out there. And also, as in an earthquake specifically, a lot of the data came in a very highly technical way, and it made it challenging sometimes for emergency managers to understand it, make use of it, use it for other derivative efforts, such as responding, providing resources to the response area. And so one of the things that, as part of this, and Maggie was a big part of this with our group there, this is the California Earthquake Clearinghouse, was this is what it kind of felt like to be successful. What we needed were partnerships with other agencies, and we needed to kind of understand during a disaster. And so here we were working on earthquakes for that group. And later that led me to working with the California National Guard. And so I was able to support them in their Joint Operations Center because I worked with many different agencies in the earthquake group, I could bring a lot of those connections and understandings of who collected the data, where does it go, how does it get processed, and then also create interaction between the people that were collecting the data in the field. And in a lot of cases, it was the great work of the USGS people. And then NASA was doing a lot of imagery. And one of the things that made, I think, our effort as successful as it was reaching out to them and asking them to present regularly. I mean, over the 5 or 6 years I was active in the California Earthquake Clearinghouse, they came in almost yearly and gave presentations to different working groups. And we often tried to pull together groups of local agencies, emergency response, but not just emergency response, all the secondary agencies that, like fire and police, and that needed to know about what information might be available, where do I get it, how do I get it. And then to what Dave was saying, we also needed to understand that targeting an interoperable format for data was an ideal way to do it, that a lot of people are using different spatial softwares and other kinds of softwares, and they don't all accept certain formats, or they're limited. But understanding what that is was really, really important. Understanding and sharing with everybody, and even showing the vendors, this is what we're trying to do. This is what would make it a whole lot easier. It actually, we saw the software evolving, and hopefully our input kind of fed into that. And in my case, working both for the clearinghouse and our clearinghouse effort had a lot to do with both real earthquakes and exercises. And one thing that you're going to see in my presentation is just the incredible value of practicing in these exercises with different agencies' data, with trying to create different products, with trying to develop those products into formats that other people can understand at different levels. Okay, because we were supporting, in my case, the general of the National Guard. He would have the questions of trying to figure out what resources were needed, where and when, and how do we get them there. And a lot of times we don't know the answer in our National Guard group, but because of the network, see the partnership up there and the workflows, we reached out to other agencies, even on weekends when something happened, and they would have like a 24/7 watch person. And you could ask them some like demographic question, which is something that I did in an earthquake case where the general wanted to know something about vulnerable populations, and I didn't quite have the data, but I was able to call on a Sunday, if you can imagine it, and just leave a message on their 24-hour machine that this is what I needed. And within an hour on a Sunday, the California Department of Public Health watch person calls me back and says, "What can we do for you?" You know, which kind of led that. And so you can kind of see these big three areas that I consider key and important. And in Dave's group, I try to provide him examples of how it's working here in California, and often when we reach out. What I recognize is that a lot of the people that gather data in disasters, such as the scientists, they have their own needs for the information, but more and more, I know at a high level, especially at Washington, D.C.'s level, they're wanting agencies to work together to develop decision-making, both data and tools. And as part of that, I believe that there's a emphasis of not just working with your federal partners, but also make sure that that information that you're creating can carry out into the local level and to the communities. And social science, I see, especially at USGS and NOAA, is becoming much more integrated in a lot of the studies. You know, they're developing data, but then they're going the next step of figuring out ideal ways of communicating it with the local communities, giving them access to that data, which is just incredible. And you can see here, as in the second point where I'm talking about synthesizing that information, is that you need to understand at what level, whether it's the emergency manager or whether it's fire or law enforcement or the communities. And even then within the communities, it's sometimes a respected leader that's going to talk to the community and how to create information, data products. And in terms of the process of what are they supposed to do during this emergency, there's a lot of work where these key community leaders, you know, they need to understand and be able to translate, which is where the science guys come in, and understanding what they can say and can't say and what makes sense. And they do that through the emergency management, you know, leaders, both fire, law, and those emergency management leaders, because they kind of are sort of an intermediary, I guess, in there. And the combination of that makes things happen. And the third point I'm making here about the exercises, and it's not just interagency, it's not just up and down levels of government, but it's also within an agency. I know that, you know, I've only been in FEMA for 3 years. And again, I'm speaking as Phil Balin, as my experience as the National Guard today, not representing FEMA, but that there are opportunities and needs to, especially in the data world, especially in the sharing of data world, is understanding what the workflow is from the people that are preparing, you know, doing hazard mitigation and planning work in an area, to when the responders come and they collect field data, to then passing that to the recovery people. That whole temporal, that workflow is something that is important to develop so that you get the maximum benefit of all this work and all those different branches for each different group. And one of the things I believe is that if you can create sort of a standard operation product, you know, here's your SOP for a data plan that'll identify how information is going to be collected and stored and communicated. That'll go a long way, especially if it's at a federal level, that other states then can kind of look at what are some of the key points that the many different agencies have thought about. And then you can see me talk about the workflows throughout all these different levels. Because when you're in recovery, which is what I'm currently in FEMA, I can spend sometimes 50% of my time when I get to recovery, which is not always the week after, the month after. Sometimes it could be several months before they call in recovery to a particular disaster. I can spend maybe 50% or more time just looking for what data has already been collected and getting to understand it. And the combination of knowing what that process is before I'm going out there and knowing that we have a process. Many of your agencies, I've seen them do really nice collaborative during a disaster meetings of data meetings. Okay, there's like, here's what we're gathering, and whether it's focused on just general data or imagery data, but I have seen it's such a valuable process is to have these kind of meetings, to socialize these meetings, and clarify what can and can't be shared. And again, once you have that information, the next step, which is something that seems like we have the least amount of time for, is how do we communicate it and make it available for between the different emergency managers and the community leaders. And here's an example back in 2017 of our exercise in Southern California, where those pretty colors, I think, are the shake map, but that green blob is actually I think it was ammonia plume. We had a hazardous material scenario where we created a plume, and we wanted to see how quickly we could get that plume up from the information, how we could figure out, well, who's within that area. And this kind of practice with different agencies' data, you can see the many different agencies that were contributing to that particular exercise. Getting them together and practicing it, many different agencies, well, some agencies use different models. The outputs have different parameters. They're expressed differently. And I'll suggest that one of the things that we learned in doing these exercises, especially like a contamination plume, was that putting it in not so much the milligrams per liter or other scientific units, but is it going to kill us? Is it going to be bad? Is it going to be an irritant? That sort of EPA way of taking a lot of different hazardous materials and giving them a categorization is extremely helpful for emergency managers. So you take that one example of hazardous material and how to communicate it, and use that for other kinds of data in terms of how is it going to be relevant for the people that need to make decisions out of it. And then how do I symbolize the data? There's standardization of symbols, and if anything, these exercises are great opportunities for different agencies to see what symbols for people are using and discuss or discuss understanding each other's symbolization. And I've noticed that the National Wildland Fire Group has done a great job nationally in standardizing symbolizations for wildfire response. And as I mentioned, I'm sitting in my role as a GIS coordinator in the Joint Operations Center of California National Guard. And there are things that we talk about during both the real events and exercises. And some of the things that we have realized is that there are times when we will lose network connectivity, and we better think about pre-staging a lot of this geospatial data on our computers ahead of time. We need to think that, like in an earthquake, you may have aftershocks, you may later lose connectivity. We periodically should be copying off some of the damage assessment areas, some of the relevant data, some of the key areas that we're watching, whether it's in our local computers, whether it's on the wall, on a poster board, which we do. We have something that during our exercises and real events, there's a list of things to watch for, things to keep an eye out for into the future. And it's just that preparation ahead of time. And then I've mentioned and provided you for today, there's a link I think you see in the doc section to a list of some of the data sources, and they're not all, there are a lot of data portals and many different agencies, some of them listed here, they pull in other agencies' data All important, though, is understanding for whatever data we're using is, the typical metadata to know, to be answer when was this data collected, and to be able to call. And we've called regularly NASA's scientists because we use their data regularly. Make sure that when we do this, not maybe during the disaster, but we've done this before because they always reach out to our agency every year before fire season. How can we help you? Okay. And it's just an example. A USGS will do this also. And a NOAA, those guys have come in and presented to us, here's our data, but if you have any questions on how to use it, we can explain it to you. That's the kind of interaction and collaboration that not just being able to share the data, but being able to explain to one of the providers, here's what we're trying to do with it. Is it appropriate or not? Is there another source for data? A lot of data will have limitations, accuracy issues, and it's important for many of these to know that, because more and more we're having multiple dashboards with overlapping data. But what's really important is understanding where is the data coming from, how recent is it, how I can use it, and to what degree. What I wanted to bring up as a challenge for us is figuring out during a disaster is when aerial plans, aerial missions are being done, a system where we can gather a footprint, and this is cross agencies, where it would imagine being able to see, here's where we're going to gather data. This is the nature of the raw data. But then also, if you could imagine just that, this is sort of a way of being able to put into an application, a web service that had all these different footprints. And when you clicked your point on a location, it would drill down and pull up the different footprints and explain to you what the kinds of data that were being collected for, potentially what some of the derivative products are, so that you know who to go to and whether you need to run a mission, because that's something that we out here in California, we have opportunity to better the way that that's being done. And I looked at ESIP as one of those organizations that understands both the authoritative data, but also the need to make it simple to figure out what's being collected and by whom. And the closest I've seen to that is that wonderful, the USGS made the Data Explorer, HDDS, I think it was, where that in the last decade was just something I would regularly use to figure out that kind of thing. But again, this is a broader question now of where are we today. The way I look at success is that we get familiar with the different portals. Therefore, why I started our conversation with a list of the portals that I was aware of to, like I said, do exercises, figure out the workflows. One of the things at the bottom here, you notice I said pictograms, and you're wondering, what pictograms? Okay, when we're communicating data, and I've learned this a lot from FEMA, especially because there's many of the people that we're serving are not English speaking first language, and that there's a great need for translating a lot of our emergency management data and even the decisions that are being made to people who don't speak English. And I have seen certain federal agencies and other agencies do great work in creating simple pictograms that show, symbolically what's expected. I will still say that needs socialization with the different community groups, but that's something, this whole spectrum of going from the collection of the data out in the field down to figuring out how to represent it for people to understand and make decisions of. And I'm summarizing the key takeaways that I've mentioned here in this conversation. It's just an example. Here are some of the questions, and Dave, I don't know how much time we have, but one of the things that I know that many of our agencies value to be able to show to the people who fund their programs is what data did you create and what decisions did you make from it? So here we are in our National Guard, using a lot of different agencies' data. It's really important that we reach back to them and explain to them, here's how we used your data. We've done this with NASA, and our California OES, who are just great collaborators, of saying, we're using this data. These are the questions we're trying to answer. And your data allowed us to do this, X, Y, and Z. That's really, really important to go that extra step and provide people that feedback, whether they want it or not. And I'll tell you, almost every agency, when it comes to funding at the end of the year, that question of, well, who's using your data? What are they doing with it? And ideally, if you make some products, be able to show that product that you're using internally for your own agency, throw some other icons of the other agencies whose data you're using on there to show that you're collaborating and that, you're not doing it all on your own, that these other agencies are equally important, if not just providing data, but also are there thoughts from them about how to do the analysis and decision making more accurately. I think you can read the rest. The one thing that I try to do, or I do a lot of in the National Guard, and I think many of you have a similar situation where you have people coming and going, a new generation, every 5 and 10 years, and people go out of a science and a government field into private industry. But there's a need regularly of training a next generation, of getting people excited, like my boss did back in the late 80s. He said, Phil, I value data decision products, and I'm going to open the doors and say, you talk to whatever agencies you want to, and I'll support that. That kind of ability to let data analytical people reach out and talk to some of the other agency people whose data they're using, who kind of get involved in whatever the analysis are, that really makes it exciting. I mean, you can hear me as I talk faster and faster that I've just enjoyed that ability to reach out and find out from the other agencies more about the data and the science about what they're doing, and try to communicate what we're trying to do with it to make sure we're doing it right. But I'd be curious if we just took one of these things. I've mentioned an example, I think, for a couple of these, if the audience might like to offer some metrics of success. Dave, if we have time for that, I mean, that would be great. What's your thought?
Yeah, Phil, I think that's great. I mean, your presentation is just terrific, and I've asked people to queue up their questions in the chat, but this is a great opportunity for asking everybody that's connected here right now to interact with Phil. Let's get it into the chat. What are some metrics of successful data sharing for your agencies? I mean, we have enough laws that have been enacted now telling agencies to share their data and get it out there. And I know there's a lot of efforts, but what are your metrics right now for successful data sharing? You can enter that in the chat. You can raise your hand, start to, participate. I'll look at the video here to see if anybody has their hands up, and then I'll just call on you so we can get this conversation going. Phil, I really appreciate that input.
Dave, just to keep us on track for time, maybe we spend about 10 minutes on this, and then we can move through the other stuff so we have time for the spreadsheet.
Yeah, that sounds great, Maggie, because we do have an assignment for everybody that's in the room here today at this meeting. You're not going to get off totally with just watching and putting some comments in the chat. We do want your input. So do I see any hands up? I don't. How about chat? Anybody in chat? I can pick on some folks. I know that we had a input from I think it was Melissa. Melissa, you're working on. You said you were a cross between developer and data provider. Do you have any ideas yet, or are you formulating anything within Nesdis for what is success for getting data out?
Hi, Dave. Was not expecting to be put on the spot today, but I can say that my primary metric is how often the data is used and the impact that it has. And that's really hard to measure.
Yeah.
Especially when we're dealing with large scale data streams like satellites. But I mean, we're really at the base of the pyramid when it comes to developing these products. So
Yeah.
the more that data can be used for decision making. That makes me happy.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's really important because when you are putting together that satellite data, you need to make sure it's available, number one. I mean, we're doing some work with NESDIS and the JPSS program for making more NOAA data available to non-technical decision makers and things like that. And it's really surprising to me how often um, uh, people, when you say, "Hey, we want to show you some NOAA data," and they're like, "Well, who's NOAA?" You know, or who's NASA? I thought they just launched rockets into space. They don't really know the data collection that happens and the processing and how that data can help them. And when you open their eyes to some of the data that NESDIS has and NOAA has, they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is awesome." So we've seen things from that already to, or all the way to GIS professionals who are looking for data services. So, anybody else have any?
Dave, there are a
Yeah,
couple of questions in the chat. I think Peter had one, and there's one from Jonathan, and Bob. So
excellent.
should they come live and ask them, or do you want to just read them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, come on live. Let's go. Peter, do you have do you have a connection to your microphone?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Sure can.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, Phil, I was just wondering, I think you had mentioned something about aerial assessments. And I was just curious, is that typically done by the National Guard or are multiple organizations involved? And then are there drone or in-person assessments or, what are all the data that goes into like that initial assessment?
I think
Um,
many different agencies provide capabilities. Civil Air Patrol is always out there, and it changes from the immediacy of when it to all the way to a week or two later when, NASA maybe, or NOAA, or not NOAA, but NASA or USGS could bring it up. The Highway Patrol sometimes sends up assets to gather data. The National Guard in California, when they need to fill in gaps for data or do it very quickly, they can use their data. They work through Cal OES. Cal OES is the agency that mission assigns the National Guard for stuff. So we wait to hear what the needs are. But once that's gathered, often that goes back into Cal OES and they figure out how they're going to distribute it. And but separate of Cal OES, there are the other agencies, the sectors like Caltrans and the electrical agencies and gas. They're all doing their own surveys sometime, and it's not always clear. And there's where everybody's doing and what's available and can they share it. So if I'm answering your question, it should be there's multiple agencies doing it. Some can react very quickly. The utilities often have a lot of great resources that they'll immediately, they'll fall along their lines. But yeah, it's something that there are many different agencies, but we still have that need as best we can of getting a better handle on who all is collecting data, when, and what might be available and those kind of things. Does that help that question?
it does. Thanks. Appreciate it.
That's great. Thanks, Peter. I appreciate that. Peter's been really helpful in doing some data mining for us as well in the cluster. Jonathan, are you on the microphone?
Yeah, hi.
There you are. Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, so I have a question. You brought up sometimes you might get involved in a disaster event like even 6 months afterwards. And maybe I misheard that, but you would spend a lot of time, you said, just reviewing data that other people had produced. And I bring that up because in the context of the disaster lifecycle cluster, we've thought about that and how data can be managed as a life cycle. So maybe it makes your job a little easier when you're getting up to speed if there was some catalog or something that could help you with discovery and understanding of that data.
No, that's a great point. Absolutely, is that, but you know, that data catalog that you mentioned really needs to come down from top, and many federal agencies that, and even states, where they say, you're going to do this. You know, in the Guard, it comes down from the general that here's this letter of instruction. Thou will collect this information regularly and put it out there. And then you have to socialize it. You have to let the different branches know, hey, we have now a process of, and so this is part of what I'm hoping you guys are going to get into, socializing that process, both intra-agency as well as to the other agencies, so that people can find it. Because yeah, you don't always get brought in. And again, in my phase in recovery, sometimes it's a couple months before we get in to do the work. And sometimes all the response guys that did all that data collection, hey, they've demobilized, they've gone back home. And unclear is where that data is. But you're exactly right, that data catalog and then the socializing of it. There's sometimes, you know, at least 20-30% you'd like to talk to the people who collected the data, ask questions for. Makes it harder if they've demobilized and gone back, right? So if I had my wishes, it would be wonderful if you actually had a presentation when your recovery section kind of comes in, about here's the information we collected and here's what it does and doesn't do. So catalogs are good, but I think there's a human element in there that's important too.
Yeah, and I wonder if some of this socialization can be social media or technology driven, rather than having like meetings and workshops or whatever, because a lot of this could be managed like a information system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's a great idea.
That kind of you know, that idea, Jonathan, reminds me of the presentation that we had from Mike Johnson in the earlier session, you know, when he did his ESIP lab effort, you know, where he went in that and identified through an automated process what data sets are available and which ones are, you know, not available by pinging them. I don't know. We'll Mike, we're going to invite you in to talk a little bit more in the cluster, and glad that you've reached out and said you want to participate more. Let me get to this other question. Bob Bunch, would you like to ask your question?
It's not so much a question. My background's with NOAA, and spent a lot of good hunk of my career providing, you know, NOAA services, and we put a lot of effort into, of course, this is real time. So we put a lot of effort into trying to make the services as redundant and as good as possible, to make them so that they're available when they're needed. Because when you're a provider, if you're working to provide some data, you've built a really cool system that's just this best thing since sliced bread, and you want emergency managers to use it and whatnot. You want to think real hard about what it will take to make it available so that it's always there, because it really sucks from the provider perspective, even, that you find out during an event that, you know, they were not able to use your service.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the Weather Service for decades has been an example of you know, best practices for making data available and getting it out there. And in the day now of web services, how can those services be expanded, and how can other types of NOAA data be brought into that fold that could be very valuable for decision makers? And, you know, Phil, I know that when, you know, there's a hurricane that makes landfall, the coastal side of NOAA, the remote sensing side, flies aircraft, King Air aircraft, and they do high-res imaging, you know, down to, I think it's 5 centimeter resolution. And once they land, they process that data, or it might be processed now on the plane, and they put it up for their web servers. And so that kind of imagery is available. We did an experiment with them in the All Hazards Consortium too, saying, hey, we want to know where you're going to fly. Can you share your flight plan? And they shared a KML out saying, here's where we're going to be flying, and the data will be available by this evening. And I think that that's something that you're looking for.
Yeah. If I could add, Bob, to your question, what I've noticed is that it's important to socialize your abilities to different audiences. So like the emergency manager, decision maker, they don't really want to hear the detail, but they want to hear what your data allows them to do and why they should care. because they give the green light for their data people like me to do the analysis, because they understand, oh, and they don't want to get into it. They want a very short, very easy. This was told to me by a fire chief, so I always have remembered it for many years now, is that what I took a whole day to present in a day-long workshop on data, he said, Phil, what I need is some hour-long, why do I care? What do I need to do? So to your point about all that good data that you have, again, there's a presentation for the decision makers in the different sectors. There's one for the data people, where data people maybe are talking to data people. But I'll mention too that what doesn't happen often, but it's really helpful for this analysis project and process and decision making, is the data people get to hear right up front what the decision makers are asking. Because sometimes there's multiple layers between the top decision makers and the guys doing the data work, and really they lose out because they get like a third version of what that question was and what that decision's being made. Does that make sense, Bob?
Yeah, it does. There's all types of levels, and I know when I was, I was less on the knowing what the data did and more on how to access it and what to do with it. You had to be pretty savvy and quickly understanding at what level the person you were talking, you're providing support, right? So you need to be very quick to sort of understand what level this person you're talking to, do they need that very brief bit of information, or do they need a whole lot more information? And I would, when I would end up talking to somebody on the phone, I would oftentimes very quickly realize, oh, this is a developer. They want to dive into the gory details of the API and what they can and can't do. Whereas, you end up talking to a program manager, and they're more interested in what you're asking, what you just commented. What can this do for me? I need a 5-minute synopsis of how this can help my operation. Sure.
And that's very challenging too within NOAA and the Weather Service, because there are so many products that are available. How do you get that information out to help people understand how to use it? Because good grief, the cone of uncertainty from the Hurricane Center is one of the most misinterpreted products that's out there, and they use it all the time. And now we're getting advice from the Hurricane Center. Look at it for a minute, but spend all the rest of your time on the impacts. And so this conversation is great. I've taken some notes that we might want to talk during one of our calls about. There's a lot of data out there, but how do we make it understandable by those users? One more question here, or maybe a point by Dana.
Dave, just in
Yeah.
the interest of time, perhaps we can continue this chat while we're doing the spreadsheet, but
Sure.
I like to just kind of get the next two exercises together and then continue the discussion while people
Yeah,
are.
sure. That sounds great, Maggie. Thanks.
Okay, no
Always
worries.
good to have Maggie.
I'm very boss.
I'll say so. No, go ahead, Maggie. Why don't you share your screen and
Oh, okay.
or do you want me to share?
Yeah, if you could just go to slide 12, and then we I've launched the Slido, and then we can do the spreadsheet.
Okay. Okay, I'm on slide 12. Now let me just share that. Here we go.
Okay, so we're gonna switch gears now and sort of ask for your input on a spreadsheet that we're developing for the Trusted Data Now initiative. So the first thing that I wanted to try to capture is, how does trusted data aid your current activities? And I think Dave has discussed some about what we consider the trusted data. So if you can just go to the Slido and put in some input, it's a word cloud, so I think it's got a 25-word limit, but just feel free to answer really quickly. We'll probably spend maybe 2 minutes on this, because then we'll go on to the spreadsheet where we're soliciting your input on what tools are available and how they might be useful to you. these are some really nice responses here. And I think it's something that Phil and I and Dave have discussed over the years as well. Definitely having reliable access, being able to figure out what the quality of the data is, more reliable science, yep, and forecasting. I'll just give you like another minute to put in your inputs. Understanding provenance, yep.
This is
Basis
great.
for
Looks like,
information, yeah. Quality, certainty.
many people look at the trusted data source too as the authoritative source, or the trusted data source could be from a private sector company who you are paying to get that data from. And so you understand the processes they're going through to make that data available. And yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your inputs. I will go ahead and keep that poll open in case you want to go back to it. But Dave, if you can share the next slide, which I think has the information. Okay, so what we've done here is put together sort of a spreadsheet that should be able to collect, as much information as we possibly can find on some of the data products and their availability. Whether they're public or private, you need to get a subscription to it. So the link was just provided by Dave in the chat, and it's up here on the screen. Dave, are you on that spreadsheet?
As soon as whoops. Are you still there, Maggie?
I am, yes.
Okay. My computer's decided to go a little crazy.
No problem. I can always share it too. I think I've got it up on my screen.
Okay.
So we wanted to take maybe 10 or 15 minutes to allow you to provide the input into this Google Sheets. And if you've gone ahead and click the link and are on that page, you'll notice that there's a very wide table there with all sorts of information. And we just ask if you're able to provide some of this information during the session. There's 4 different tabs at the bottom. There's extreme weather, wildfires, land hazards, and other. I put a lot, so Phil provided us with a very long list of data sets that he often uses and looks at. So I put that on the others, just because I think that they have a more general purpose for a lot of the data needs that folks might need. So please feel free to go in. You should be able to edit and provide information on, and I know, Peter, you also provided a lot of information during our disaster lifecycle cluster telecon. So I'll work on getting that propagated into this as well. But if folks have this information, are willing to or able to put in as much information as you possibly can in the spreadsheet. I know that it's very large, and we're trying to be as thorough as we can in gathering that information. But we'll spend about maybe 10 minutes on this. And in the interim, while we're doing this exercise, please feel free to continue this great discussion that was going on after Phil's talk. I think that we can both enter data and chat at the same time. So I will monitor the chat and see if anybody's hands are raised. But if you have any points of discussion that you'd like to share in addition to what we've already covered, please feel free. And Dave, do you want me to share the spreadsheet on the screen? Did we lose Dave?
He's unmuted, but I don't hear him. Yeah, Matt, I think that would be a good idea, Maggie, just to
Okay.
See what's
Okay.
going on. Dave did put the link in chat.
Yes.
And Maggie, if you can hear me, sorry, I'm
Oh,
there you
yes.
are.
doing, so I may have to leave and come back
Oh.
in.
Nope, that's not what I wanted to share.
Maggie, this is Phil. If I could
Uh-huh.
add one thing, I just wanted to point out to many of you that many of these portals, they have a public access ability, but there's often you have to log in because sometimes
Yes.
it's an internal version. And I'll suggest to people that if you're not of that agency, it's really worth an email to them when you're doing a project that needs the data, because they're the authoritative source, to ask them for access to it. I know that during COVID, our FEMA group regularly asked many different agencies, yeah, we know you have this data. We know it's behind your firewall. Is there a way that we could get access to it? And it kind of can open up certain opportunities to get at that data, or at least a derivative of the data. PII, of course, is always an issue, but there are ways of getting getting a derivative of many of these data sets that allow it to be more shareable. So and some of these things that I listed in the others area, like Pacific Disaster Center,
Yes.
they just ask you to get a login. So just recognize that that's something to do. That's also out there for some of these, is that, hey, they just want to know who's using their system, and it's free in most of these cases. But again, my takeaway was, if you don't ask, you don't get. So a lot of us are working on problems that we need other agencies' data, and what we see in public, often there's a lot more helpful data, and it's worth a question to the people who are creating the data if there's a way to get access to it.
Yes, and if folks know of about the status of whether it's publicly available, we also have a column in to say, you know, whether it's research or operations, and also whether a subscription is required. And so in the case of PDC's disasterware, it's not necessarily a subscription, but you need to apply for an account to be able to access that tool. So yeah, are there any other questions, comments, or discussion points that anybody would like to share while we're working on filling out this? I see lots of people putting in inputs in there, so thank you very much for that.
This Maggie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, my computer was going a little bit crazy. So thanks for sharing your screen. Yeah, anybody who has ideas, and I particularly want to invite any private sector organizations that are out there that have data sets that they would like to offer as a trial, as a test, anything like that, so you can make us more aware of data sets that are available. And Phil, I just had a quick question for you, and that was, I'm just going to leave my camera off just so nothing goes crazy anymore. Do you, well, you were talking about having data sets that are available only to internal to California or a certain agency, and you wanted to get access to them. Does that stuff come up when you do exercises, when you go through an exercise and say, hey, I need this data, I need this data? And they say, well, it's behind a firewall. And you say, well, we got to fix that.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes up. And again, these conversations, they have to occur before disasters,
Oh,
because it's
yeah.
just,
Oh,
you won't
yeah.
get, but it's definitely true. I mean, every state, not every, but many states have their emergency management system. They have a GIS group. California is a very, large GIS group, but they are doing an incredible job of they have weekly meetings every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. They meet for anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, where they just bring in all the different state agencies and say, hey, what's going on? Do you need anything? And as much as we're putting together data repositories, I'll tell you all that I think that knowing who these people are, engaging them, is that building a network with the actual individuals is incredibly helpful.
Right.
And so again, we're listing data sets, but the human part of the people who do this and the people who support this, they're really important also. And
yeah. No, that's really important, Phil. And I'm just wondering for everybody else who's on the line here in this meeting, if you're with an agency at any level, do you have efforts going on to build relationships with data users, or are you really focused just on getting data and making it available, processing your data and making it available, because you're under direction from new laws that have come out saying you've got to make it available and machine readable and all that sort of stuff. Is it something where you've thought about in your agency about how other agencies or the public or others can access and use your data? And you can put that responses in the chat. Maggie, when my computer did a little hiccup, the chat went away, so I opened it up and it's blank.
Oh, yeah, maybe that, let me see if I can get the chat up. Let's put it up here.
We can't see the chat window that you're sharing. It doesn't.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. So you can keep it up
Yes.
and look at it. Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't look like there are any further comments in the chat, but if you are busy entering data into the spreadsheet and just want to come off mute, if you have anything that you want to share.
This is great, the
Particularly-
data that's being put in. It's awesome.
Yeah, particularly if you want to mention at all any details about the data or location of such that that you're inputting, or other than that, also if there are any comments about like whether this is actually helpful to the community, because speaking with Bill for a number of years, he's always said that there's no one place where one stop shop where you can come and get all of the information on the different services and data that are available, whether they're what their latency is. So are they going to be available in 24 hours, in a week? Some of the satellite data may not have immediate access. So are there like complaints or wishes from folks? And also we wanted to share this spreadsheet, but also put it somewhere on the ESIP website so that somebody can actually go and take a look at this catalog, whether it just be a link or whatever. But do you think this exercise is helpful in providing information for what you could use in your experience with disasters?
I know for us, Maggie, while people are thinking about putting something into the chat, that the group that we work with, All Hazards Consortium, is very interested in identifying data sets, and this kind of activity, I think, is going to have high value to them. And I think with non-technical users, we might need to go in and look at the data and say, okay, specifically, this is going to help you, or this is going to help you. Because once you go into these hubs or portals, sometimes it can be overwhelming. But at least we're starting to get this input, which shows, cross-sector data and its usefulness. Like we have a CDC data set, DHS, Census, USDA, Synoptic. Bill Callahan from Synoptic Weather is on, and they're an ESIP partner to bring out different data sets, and these companies have APIs that can be connected to. So this is just a great exercise in getting more data in here. And it's something that we'll be diving into in the disaster lifecycle cluster.
I have a question for Phil, because I know that this has been a want from him for probably a decade. Do you see this as a useful resource as the ESIP partners provide sort of information that you can come and take a look at when you're, hopefully not just when you're responding, but when when you're doing other work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, remember what I said about when you have a disaster and you're thrown out there and you have to get started, finding what data covers an area can take a little time or it can take a lot of time. To have a list of and familiarity of data and who I call if I need something different, it is extremely helpful. But I would broaden that group of potential users to also, there's a lot of agencies who have grants, and the grants have requirements, and the requirements come from sometimes a lot of your own data. People are on the call here, like USGS and potentially NOAA, and understanding how to use it and packaging it in a way that they maybe have an interface that specifically allows them to see the data that are in these grant requirements and make a picture of it, so see the data, turn things on and off, being able to quickly save it as a PDF so that they can insert that on grants, because many communities, local agencies don't have resources, GIS people, to do that. That's why this growing list of applications, and when you look at these, look at what can they do, and then we need to socialize it and kind of put it into context to why should I care? Well, I should care if I'm a decision maker on emergency management potentially, but I may also care if I'm trying to help a particular community or state get grants, and they have to identify how much risk is there, where are the damages, how often do they occur. That data, it's not always easy to find, but those are the kind of things that many of the grants that, because our COVID group in FEMA that I work in, the recovery end of it, that's what kinds of grants people have to put sometimes that specific information. And I'll say that the outreach to the communities, when you recognize that of how we can help, and sometimes our data isn't good in some places, and it's important for the communities to go, hey, we're a small part of this county, and this county level data just doesn't make sense. We're missing here. Is there something we can do? And sometimes these authoritative groups like the census has been great during COVID about saying, we know that we don't really have great data, as detailed as in the CONUS that we have in the Pacific Island territories that our Region 9 that I work in. And they'll say, what can we do to help you? Tell us what your challenges are or needs, and we'll figure out and put some voice behind the use of our data about what it can and can't be used. And maybe the requirement can change because the data just doesn't exist to do that. I think, Maggie, to your question, a lot of these different data sets, they're at different resolutions. They can be used for some questions, but they can't be used for everything. It's just I'm expanding it out a bit to help the communities too with the understanding of what these grant requirements are as they pertain to the kind of data that you have listed here.
Excellent. Okay, Dave, do you want to go ahead and wrap up with the last couple of slides and Slido? I think our last Slido question.
Sure.
And then if we still have time, then of course everybody's free to continue the discussion. So I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, and just want to let everybody know that's in the session here, this document will stay live. We're going to use this document as a live document within the disaster lifecycle cluster. So if you go back to your organization and you think, man, I had all this other data that I should have put in, please keep this link handy and you can put it in. It's going to be a living, breathing document. Perhaps if you change a server, then that link might change. Come back in here and change it, because we're looking to do some testing with this. We're going to go through and look at these links and look at the data that's available. We'll be recommending these links to other users so they can check it out themselves. So this is going to be a very worthwhile session that goes on, not just for the benefit of us in the room, but for the benefit of future data users too. And so let me go to the next slide, and I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully all this works okay. This is a Slido question, and you can see the code there where you can reconnect to the Slido, or you still have it open, or click on the link. or yeah, I guess you can't click on it because I'm sharing my screen. But the question is, how do you imagine participating with a cluster? This is the winter meeting and the summer meeting are great. Summer meeting will be in person in Asheville, where we'll be able to really have a great time and dive into certain things. Virtually, this is a meeting, and this is how we conduct our meetings each and every month. So we invite you to come back and participate. So how do you imagine participating with a cluster? And we'll see the results coming in. Rolling up my sleeves is a great answer to have if you really want to just dive in and say, look, I have something that I have some talents I want to bring to the table. I love data. I'm a data geek, and I want to make sure that we can find and discover and put data sets to use. And Phil, I'm sure, will be very interested in staying engaged with the cluster like he has been and running some tests. So we say, hey, Phil, we got some quality data sets here. You want to test these out? So all this is great and important.
And those of you that have responded with a thumbs up on the being involved in the group, if you can just maybe in the check-in area of the Google Doc that's in the Kiko chat, if you can just, provide your next to your information, whether you want to, be added to the mailing list or get information on if you're on the mailing list, you'll find out when our meetings are. But if you just identify that in case you're not part of the cluster or on the mailing list yet, then we can identify who you are and be able to add you and continue to keep you informed of what we're up to.
Yeah, that's great. So we have 13 responses. This is great. We really appreciate that. We'll let it go for another maybe 15 seconds if you're thinking about how you might want to participate with the cluster. Remember, ESIP is all about collaboration. So the thing that I love best about ESIP is I'm a private sector organization, but we have federal agencies, state, municipalities, NGOs, universities. And we can all just sit in a room and on the Zoom here and just talk about what are challenges, what's the realities of data being offered to everybody. I've heard some say it's a great goal. We're nowhere near there. We're still offering our data as this way, but it's going to take a lot of work for us to get it into a web service format. And all of those discussions are very valuable because it helps us gauge how we can identify data and put it to its best use in the format that it's being offered today. Okay, so we'll 15 inputs. That's great. Thank you for that. So I'd like to wrap up here. We have maybe about 6 minutes left. And this is some information I've been pinged. Hey, how do we continue to stay connected with the disaster lifecycle cluster? And we really appreciate that. So our next meeting is going to be on March 7th at 4:00 p.m. Eastern time. That's when the meetings are, 4:00 Eastern time. We record these meetings and we also invite speakers to come in and give us briefings on what's happening with data in their organization. And we record those meetings and they're available. What we're also going to do, because ESIP just created a sub-channel on the YouTube, the ESIP YouTube channel, where we're going to record some of these presentations by themselves and put them on the YouTube channel so more people can get access to, hey, what's happening with data here and there. So number one, I would recommend you subscribe to the ESIP YouTube channel. So when videos get updated there, you will get a notification and you can go in and look and say, I'm interested or not interested, and continue on. In these meetings, we continue the discussion that we've talked about today. So we're going to be building upon that, adding data sets to the spreadsheet, contacting others, contacting people and inviting them to come in to speak about how they use data. If you have suggestions and you say, hey, Dave, Maggie, I know somebody who really would be a great speaker about data and what the innovative things are that they're doing in their organization, please let us know and we can invite them, or you invite them for us so we can bring them in to one of our monthly meetings. That would be great. Maggie and I are the co-chairs. We have the ESIP disasters email list. I think that's all in the Google Docs document that you entered your attendance here today. If you scroll down to the bottom, I think there are resources in there, Maggie, if you can check and just make sure that that's correct. So we have the disasters email list where we send things out. It's a listserv, and then you'll get those emails. We also have notes from previous meetings are located at this document, and this PowerPoint is available as well in this session for the session docs. And if it's not in there, it will be right after this. So you can click on these links and see for years all the conversations that we've had within the disaster lifecycle cluster.
I was talking while muted. Those links aren't in the document yet, but I will copy and paste them in there.
Oh, great. Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I want to just take a minute just to see if anybody has any questions. This is, we want to make sure that we make sure I'm just expanding my window here so I can see everybody that's on. If you have any questions or have any final comments, please raise your hand. And Phil, I would just like to thank you for participating in this. And it's very rare where we have not only a user, but a user who's a GIS expert and wants to put more data to work. Tell us about what your challenges are and give us some of this information so we can think about it. I mean, all your questions are great and ones that we'll look at further within the disaster lifecycle cluster. So thank you, Phil, for taking the time.
Okay, Dave, I totally lied. It is in the documents.
Oh, good. Good. That's excellent.
And I'll put a link to the presentation in there as well.
Oh, super. Thank you, Maggie. So Phil, I'm just wondering if you have any final comments you'd like to make? You're muted, I think.
Yeah, just great thanks to many of the agencies on this call here who over the years have really helped us out in California, by giving us the data, by explaining it to us, by being regularly engaged. I mean, more and more I'm seeing heads put together from different agencies on specific problems, like our debris flow problem that we have with these big storms we're getting. We get these different heads figuring out, well, okay, this year, this storm that's coming in, where are we going to put our resources? We want to pre-stage, we want to, provide information to the emergency managers. We're making progress. It just needs to continue. But I'm appreciative greatly of all your many agencies who are participating and giving your staff time to reach out to us and work on specific problems. So that's my final comment, is appreciation.
That's great, Phil. Thank you so much. And we are almost, do we have about a minute to go? Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to add to the conversation? Otherwise, not seeing any hands, I want to thank you all for coming to the session. I hope it was valuable in some ways, if not all ways, in figuring out what the ESIP Disaster Lifecycle Cluster is doing. We're all about data. We're all about putting it to use, and we're all about making sure it can be accessed and understood by sort of novice users. That's a big challenge there. But once they can see the data and we can explain to them what it means, then they're going to be your friend forever because they may not have had access to that too, particularly underserved communities. So thanks everybody for joining this session, and I hope to see you in March during our Disaster Lifecycle Cluster call. Thanks to Maggie and thanks to Phil, and we'll see you in the next ESIP session. Thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody. Phil, just real quick before you take off, is it okay if we share your presentation as well in the notes here?
Yeah, I think it's very generic, and yeah, that's fine.
Awesome. Thank you.
And this,
That's
a quick
great.
plug for the coffee break that's coming up for those that are still around, that we'll have a coffee break in just a short amount of time. You could find the, or it's at 3:15. So yeah, in just 15 minutes. So thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.